decades, this is where Sydney partied, King's Cross. And then there were 2 deaths in 2012 and 2013, which changed everything for this precinct. 2 young men were king hit, they died, and it started a massive legislative reform which has changed the way that King's Cross operates. These laws are known as the Lockout Laws, and on the eve of the election, we asked, how has Sydney changed, how are you partying, and what's happened to the cross?
The Ted Knopf's Foundation works with young people across Australia, mainly with drug and alcohol issues, but we also work with young people in our street universities with mental health issues, crime-related issues. I think the things that made me feel uneasy about the cross are things that make me still feel uneasy about it. You know, it's the sleazy elements. And I don't actually think that that's such a bad thing. I think that humans need some way to express their darker shadows. It is the epitome of being an Australian human being.
Back when I used to go out when I was about 18, 19 years old, it was a lot crazier. There was a lot more people around, a lot more energy. The lines were longer, it was a lot more hassle. It seems that there was so much more drama.
A typical Friday or Saturday night at St Vincent's before the Lockout Laws was a fair bit of chaos in the emergency department. And it was due to very high density of people intoxicated in the wee hours of the morning, not able to escape out of the cross and rolling from one bar to the next bar.
You'd get in here about kind of 10:30. You'd be in the club till about 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and then people would start to kind of leave and get antsy, and then you'd struggle home, you'd try to catch a cab. Like you'd spend half an hour, 40 minutes just trying to get a cab.
Before the Lockout Laws, between the hours of 8 p.m. and 8 a.m. over a 1-year period, we saw 26 serious head injury patients through our intensive care unit. Since the Lockout Laws, at exactly the same time period after the Lockout Laws, we only saw 11. So that's a reduction, more than 50% of the serious head injuries.
My first memories of King's Cross were of my grandfather taking me around the streets. It feels more quiet than it ever has been for a Thursday night. And I think that's not just the Lockout Laws, I think that's the gentrification that's been happening.
So my name is Maximilian Matthews. I'm a director at a Sydney-based record label called Cabin Jam. At the moment, we're mainly having to throw parties on the northern beaches and in Marrickville in private warehouse sort of locations. We sort of realised that there was a hole to be filled. 1, because of the Lockout Laws, and 2, it seems to be what kids are gravitating towards these days. It's like fashion. It's recycled ideas. Like in the 70s and 80s, they were getting semi-trailers and throwing parties in the backs of those, and it's almost the same concept. It's just we have the benefit of technology on our side, and we have the means to run some really exciting parties for kids who it almost seems like they weren't going to get anything. I mean, when my parents were kids, there was pubs everywhere and there was bands everywhere and there was so much entertainment, and there was no sort of telling somebody, no, you can't have fun and you can't drink. And
it's completely different these days, and I don't think the clubs offer what I had. I'd say you definitely strategize your nights a lot more. So the Inner West is a big one. Cheaper drinks, like not as much lines, friendlier people, friendly attitudes.
Since the introduction of the Lockout Laws, our emergency physicians are telling us that they are seeing less people. There are still people in the cross, don't get me wrong, but it's not like the party animal atmosphere that it was. Yes, places like Double Bay have seen an increased number of patrons down in that area. But St Vincent's still is the drawing area, so if the problems moved, we would still see the people coming to our hospital.
I see violence in the suburbs all the time. I feel like it just goes a bit unreported. It's like the Wild West, like there's fights all the time, and there's kids getting pushed onto the road and getting hit by cars and then getting up and fighting again, and you don't hear about it.
It is a much easier department to work in because we don't have people coming in with preventable situations like the over-intoxication with alcohol. And the morale in the intensive care unit is wonderful because that's very depressing for the workers in the intensive care unit to see young lives ruined by such a simple thing.
So what are kids getting from coming to our parties? You're paying $10 on the door. There's no one telling you you're not dressed right. There's no one telling you that maybe this isn't for you, champ. Like, it's offering it to anyone who wants to experience it. It's almost like a hippie sort of thing. Like, we haven't actually had one fight, and we've run a few parties. There was one we had over 300 kids, no dramas. And I'm talking kids from all walks of life because there's no animosity, there's no VIP area, and especially growing up in the society we grow up in, it's nice to know that there's something different out there for you.
When it comes to the lockout laws, we think that any government which is in power really needs to come down and speak to the workers at the hospitals, the ambulance officers and the police officers. We don't want to go back to those days where it was just alcohol-fueled rage and injuries that were terrible for the individuals that were involved.
I think the rest of Sydney could learn a lot from what's happened in King's Cross over the last year. With this election, the lockout laws have to be an agenda item, and I think that Labor and the Liberal Party need to continue this. Don't ease up on it and don't get too tough on it either. It really does feel like being stuck between a rock and a hard place, and I feel for government being in that role, but when it comes to a place like King's Cross, to save lives, we essentially have to walk that line.
The sun comes up on the land of red dirt, the land where the black man done the legwork. And this is dedicated to the years of pain, color where the bright crew come.